because they're always going to violate it. They're always going to go one step further, one step farther, step on some more toes. So the Biden administration, or excuse me, the potato administration. I can't believe I'm even reading these words in the combination that they're in. Urges the Supreme Court to let cops enter homes and seize guns without a warrant. Right there, folks, you have a totalitarian dictatorship. There's nothing else. That's it. You might as well be living in North Korea. So, the U.S. Supreme Court on Wednesday will hear an oral argument in the Caniglia versus Strom, a case that could have sweeping consequences for policing due process and mental health for the potato administration. Attorneys general from 9 states urging the High Court to uphold warrantless boomstick confiscation, but would ultimately become a major Fourth Amendment case begun with an elderly couple spat over a coffee mug. So this potatoes administration, basically, neuters the First Amendment, essentially, because there isn't really. Water down the Second Amendment to essentially, it doesn't exist anymore. Hop, skip, and jump over the Third. Destroy the Fourth and possibly the Fifth Amendment in this case. It's crazy. And if any of these justices on the Supreme Court say, yeah, the cops can enter your home without a warrant to seize boomsticks, there is no country left anymore. There isn't. It's done. Stick a fork in it, done. So the case that's being, I guess, litigated over here or seen by the Supreme Court is in August of 2015. 68-year-old Edward Caniglia joked to Kim, his wife of 22 years, that he didn't use a certain coffee mug after his brother-in-law had used it because he might catch a case of dishonesty. That quickly spiraled into an hour-long argument. Growing exhausted from bickering, Edward stormed into his bedroom, grabbed his unloaded handgun, and put it on the kitchen table in front of his wife. With a flair for the dramatic, he then said, "Why don't you just shoot me and get me out of my misery?" Probably not a good idea, Mr. Edward. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the tactic backfired and the two continued to argue. Eventually, Edward took a drive to cool off, but when he returned, the argument flared up once again. This time, Kim decided to leave the house and spend the night at a motel. Next day, Kim phoned home. No answer. Worried, she called the police in Cranston, Rhode Island, and asked them to perform a well check on her husband to escort her home. Again, never call the police in this instance. You don't. Why? Because the police just don't go from 0 to 2 and see, well, what kind of, issue do we have here? No, they go to 0 to 11. And you could argue that that's what they should do. I argue they shouldn't. When they arrived, officers spoke to Edward on the back deck. According to the incident report, he seemed normal, was calm for the most part, and even said he would never commit suicide. However, none of the officers had asked Edward any questions about the factors relating to his risk of suicide, risk of violence, or prior misuse of firearms. Edward had no criminal record and no history of violence or self-harm. In fact, one of his officers later admitted he did not consult any specific psychological or psychiatric criteria for medical professionals for his decision that day. Still, police were convinced that Edward could hurt himself, and instead he head to a local hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, after refusing and insisting that his mental health wasn't their business. And really, it's not. Edward agreed only after the police falsely promised they wouldn't seize his guns after while he was gone. Again, police lie all the time. Never believe the police. They tell you one thing, they're going to do the complete opposite. If they're there to help, they're here to hinder. Well, if they're there to hinder, they're always there to hinder. So, believing the seizures were approved by her husband, Kim led the officers to the 2 handguns the couple owned, which were promptly seized. Even though Edwards was immediately discharged from the hospital, police only returned the firearms after he filed a civil rights lawsuit against him. Critically, when police seized the guns, they didn't claim it was an emergency or to prevent imminent danger. Instead, the officers argued their actions were a form of community caretaking. You're going to hear that term a lot there, folks, in Lazo Land. Community caretaking. And they're going to get so much carte blanche over the Fourth and Fifth Amendment and the Second and possibly the First. a narrow exception to the Fourth Amendment's warrant requirement. Therein lies the rub, folks. The Fourth Amendment, if this gets approved, is no more. See, first created by the Supreme Court nearly 50 years ago, the community caretaking exemption was designed for cases involving impounded cars and highway safety on grounds that police are often called to car accidents to remove nuisances like inoperable vehicles on public roads. Well, how did it devolve? Oh, I know. Both the district and appellate court upheld the seizures as reasonable under the community caretaking exception. In deciding the Canigula's case, the First Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals acknowledged that the doctrine's reach outside the motor vehicle context is ill-defined. Nevertheless, the court decided to extend that doctrine to cover private homes, ruling that officers do not exceed the proper providence of the community caretaking responsibilities. They did. Well, what do I know, right? Siding with law enforcement, the First Circuit noted that a police officer must act as a master of all emergencies who is expected to provide an infinite variety of services to preserve and protect the community's safety. By letting the police operate without a warrant, the community caretaking exception is designed to give police elbow room to take the appropriate action. Never give the government or its armed actors, the police, more wiggle room or more elbow room to caretake the community, because they're always going to violate it. They're always going to go one step further, one step farther, step on some more toes. You give the police and the government an inch, and they take 20 freaking miles on you. But my whole talk about this is that once this gets approved, the community caretaking, the police can just enter your home if there's even a thought that you may have a boomstick in your house. And especially if laws that are currently on the books do get passed. You really think the police aren't just going to roll legal now, but by legislative fiat aren't legal anymore? That's of course what they'll do. They will do that. And these police out there have no problem doing it. Why? Because they have a job. If they tell them, hey, if you don't do this, we're going to fire you. Of course they're going to do it. Of course they're going to do it. So this is just basically a Trojan horse, if you will, to enter your home. If all these lawsuits these legislative items in the House of Representatives right now and in the Senate get passed, you can bet your bottom dollar that goddamn potato is going to come using his jackbooted thugs, the police, the FBI, et al. And they're going to come into your home if they think you have a boomstick they just made illegal, or even appliances you can insert or add to your illegal boomstick that they just made illegal, and look for them. Believe me, you and me, this is a Trojan horse, and the potato is just one step away from a Kim Jong-un.